Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show Nerd News. This will be a weekly segment where we run down some of the top stories in nerd news. I'm your host, John F. Allen, Tower 1.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan, Tower 2.
Welcome to our first show for this particular segment of the Two Towers Talk Show Nerd News. And I have to say that there's a lot going on, so we'll just dive right in. First topic, Netflix and Sony deal. So according to news sources, Sony and Netflix have reached a new licensing deal, which gives the streaming service an exclusive window for airing Sony's theatrical releases starting in 2022. The agreement gives Netflix an 18-month exclusive window for Sony films, the result of a $1 billion offer from Netflix over a 4-year period. In addition, Netflix will have a first look for any Sony direct-to-streaming titles, which the studio is planning to produce in the coming years. So what's your take on this, RJ?
$1 billion offer. It's good to know what that price increase went toward, right?
Right, exactly.
So, I think it's going to be interesting. What I read about it is that like they'll also have a back library available as well, which will be good because Sony is not really consistent across the different streaming services I have. Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films will come and go all over the place. You don't know when they're going to show up. You don't know when they're going to reappear. And what excites me about this, and what's weird about this, is, of course, those are all kind of co-owned by Disney, and yet the things I'm most looking forward to having access to are regular access to the Spider-Man films and also Venom and the upcoming Morbius the Living Vampire and those sorts of Sony specific projects that you don't normally, you're not necessarily going to see on Disney Plus. It's interesting that Netflix jumped on that. And then there are a few things from Sony I've not gotten around to watching yet, like the all-female Ghostbusters film, which I've just have never gotten around to. It'll be nice to have a place to just stream it. As far as what Sony has coming up, of course, there's more Ghostbusters movies, and I'm sure there's just a lot of things I'm not even aware of. It'll be nice to have one place to go where you can, that after something is shown in the theater, it's going to show up somewhere that you can kind of count on.
Yeah, I agree. It's really, I think, a smart move for Sony because they're not going to have to invest a lot of capital in a streaming service of their own when they can use Netflix in this partnership. I think that it's an interesting turn of events, too, because it gives, let's say, the Spider-Man film properties, gives them first dibs on those. That being said, even though it's a Marvel character, it's not produced by Disney Plus. So it's kind of like, Netflix is going to be streaming these movies when they first come out, and probably going to do with the back catalog, too, because the Spider-Man movies aren't streaming on Disney Plus at this moment.
Yeah, and they've been Sony for as long as that goes back, including those odd films. Like, I haven't seen Venom yet. It's just not been available. I've looked for it, I mean, I guess I'm cheap. I could rent it. I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime if I wanted to do that, but it will be nice to have a service I'm already paying for, having things along those lines. It'll be good. Right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, because this is an 18-month exclusive window, which means that after that window expires, then it's up for renegotiation as to what streaming services can show their films, the Sony films. So it'll be interesting to see if after this 18-month exclusive window has expired, will Disney Plus be like, hey, let us, air some of the Spidey films? And that would be an interesting little thing to do. We'll have to see how that develops.
Absolutely.
All right. So the next topic is Marvel Studios' She-Hulk series adds Hamilton star Renee Elise Goldsberry to cast. It was announced this prior week that Hamilton star Renee Elise Goldsberry was added to the cast of She-Hulk, a Marvel Studios series set to air on Disney Plus, starring Tatyana Maslany as the title character. The character's name that Goldsberry will be portraying is reportedly Amelia, but no other information has been provided. This has drawn a lot of speculation from fans, and people may remember Goldsberry. She played Angelica Schuler, which in the Hamilton production, which earned her a Tony Award, a Grammy Award, a Drama Desk Award, and a Lucille Lortel Award. Her recent credits include Netflix's Altered Carbon and NBC's Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and she has been starring as a lead in the comedy series Girls 5 Eva. Seems like it should be 4, but I don't know. It's created and written by Meredith Scardino and stars Tina Fey, and it airs on NBC's Peacock streaming services. What do you have to say about this, RJ? A lot, I would imagine.
Well, because it's the last thing you read, I only recently saw that Peacock is putting original programming on their service, which I imagine someone's watching it. I don't know, but yeah, I'm really excited about the She-Hulk series. They keep putting out these really tasty teases about it. Tatyana Maslany is a favorite of mine. For those that don't know, I was a huge fan of Orphan Black, and it's been a few years since she's been on television, so I'm excited to see her come back. And it's going to be an interesting role for her. I mean, I used to joke that she could play about anything, but this was not on my radar necessarily. So we'll have to see. Putting in someone best known for a Broadway part, also intriguing. It's hard to kind of figure out how that's going to work very easily. If we ever want to talk about maybe something we may clash on, I was not a big fan of Altered Carbon, so I'm not really familiar with her other work, but she certainly was quite striking in Hamilton. I don't know the name of the character. I haven't looked at She-Hulk, I think, since John Byrne was writing her, in the 90s. So it's been a minute since I've caught up with She-Hulk, but these series are their own thing, and the Disney Plus series are always exciting, and I think She-Hulk has a huge amount of potential. So they're definitely working the PR machine. They're it's going to be a quality show, just like all the others, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let me first say that Renee Elise Goldsberry's performance in Hamilton was a standout role.
I agree.
It was definitely something that earned her an even brighter spotlight. She had been around for a while with regards to her acting on stage. That being said, I think that it's a very smart choice in putting her in the cast of this series. You have a lot of people in the Marvel MCU films that have Broadway experience or stage presence prior to being members of a actual film. So you have a lot of people who were stage performers prior to their roles in movies, and I think that that's a strength. I think that can only lend to the quality of the acting in these productions, and I think that that was a smart choice for Marvel Studios and Disney Plus. not to mention the fact that she has a physical presence. She's a beautiful woman. She's statuesque. She has a presence with regards to her voice and her acting. This is going to definitely lend itself to her character in some way. I couldn't imagine them not utilizing her gifts in those aspects to personify the character in which she's portraying. From what I've read, it doesn't appear that this character has appeared in the comics. This is probably going to be an original character for the show. I can't make that assertion 100%, but just based upon some of the things that I've read and heard, it appears that that's the case. I'm very much excited for this series. I'm excited for a number of reasons, not to mention not just because of this cast edition, but because of Tatyana Maslany in the role. I agree. She has a chameleon-like presence in Orphan Black that lends to the credibility of her acting skills, and how she can go from one character personality to the next like that is an amazing testimony to her acting abilities. And the fact that Mark Ruffalo will be resuming his role as Bruce Banner Hulk, and they are adding the character of Abomination to this show as well. And that in and of itself is, an interesting thing, because, Marvel doesn't have the rights to produce a film that is just solely for, the Hulk. They don't have the rights. I think that's tied up with Universal. And so with that being the case, I think that, this is a good vehicle for them to use for showcasing not only the She-Hulk character, but also the continuing saga for the Bruce Banner character. Tim Roth was the actor who played the Abomination, Emil Blonsky, in the Incredible Hulk film, which was, you could consider that being part of the MCU canon, because that film was repurposed, even though you changed actors portraying Bruce Banner / the Hulk. The story is incorporated into the MCU. So I think that's a very interesting choice. I think it's a very interesting direction for this series. They also have some leeway with regards to the other Hulk characters in this show as well, which would be like the leader who was shown in the Incredible Hulk film, and maybe Doc Samson, and of course Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, who was portrayed in mostly all of the other MCU films, or at least referenced, and he was portrayed by William Hurt excellently. So I would venture to say that this particular edition is just, another layer of talent on a very talented cast already. There's so many different directions they could go in with the She-Hulk character being an attorney, how she's going to be incorporated in other aspects of the MCU is just an amazing thing. So I'm very interested in seeing the direction that they go with this series for sure.
Yeah, and one more thought. I mean, Hamilton streamed on. It's still available on Disney Plus, but last July it was a big deal when it launched, and I think that raised Renee Goldsberry's star. And Disney's very smart to take advantage of that. And now she's one of the Disney princesses, as it were. I mean, we've seen Disney Plus reuse their talent over and over, and they do it very smartly. And I think this is just another indication of that.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be cool.
Absolutely. So we will go on to discuss our last topic in this segment. And let me say, this is the big one. I think we really saved the big one for last here. Knives Out sequel is set for Netflix in a unprecedented $469 million deal. Netflix has shelled out a huge amount of money to acquire the rights to produce and air the sequel to the hit film Knives Out, which was directed by Rian Johnson and stars an all-star cast, which includes Daniel Craig, Christopher Plummer, Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans, and Lakeith Stanfield, just to name a few. Knives Out earned $311 million globally, with a paltry budget of $45 million. The deal also sees Netflix receive the rights to a third film if writer-director Rian Johnson signs on. Craig, Johnson, and producer Ram Bergman stand to earn upwards of $100 million each on the deal as well. This would give Johnson complete creative control over the project with no mandatory input from Netflix, provided that Craig stars in the sequels and they maintain the budget of the original film.
Okay.
This is huge. What do you got?
Yeah, that I didn't read the last line as closely, but I was going to mention that what I had read was part of that total sum was a huge payout for Daniel Craig and Rian Johnson, and then they were supposed to keep the $45 million budget per film was also a part of that. And you do the math, and you still got plenty of money left over. But I mean, I have two thoughts here. First of all, I think it's great that Rian Johnson, who I think was maybe unfairly kind of beat down for a couple of years after the Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. In retrospect, I think The Last Jedi, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think it was possibly the most interesting of the three. Maybe not the most successful. Maybe it didn't make the most sense, but I think it was trying hardest to do something new and different. And I think, maybe it went a little too far in some places. And so Rian Johnson kind of became, the guy to go after there for a few months. But then he turns around and he does Knives Out, which did decent business. From what I understand, Lionsgate was all set to do a sequel, and then for some reason they, probably COVID related, I'm guessing, because that's how it kind of times out, they were unable to follow through, and then Netflix saw an opportunity and stepped in, and apparently they are willing to make it well worth his while to come back and do 2 more films along with the producer and Daniel Craig. I don't know if I can take 2 more movies of Daniel Craig's accent, but I guess I'm willing to give it a try. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Another thought kind of connected to this, John, and wondering if you feel the same way. Doesn't it feel like Netflix kind of pioneered streaming services as we understand it, and yet now it feels like they're kind of scrambling to grab some IP, like they're almost playing catch up with HBO and Disney Plus at this point? It's kind of like, they had so many series in the say 2017, 2018, obviously Stranger Things and several others like that, and now it seems like they focused more on movies and that sort of thing, and now they're kind of trying to find more IP that they can kind of dig into. It feels like they're almost kind of coming up from behind in some ways, and yet they're clearly willing to pay what they need to and invest in IP that they think are worth it. So it's an interesting time as a consumer to, in the end, I think we end up with some great entertainment. So it's all of a win for us, but you wouldn't think Netflix at this point would have to play so aggressively, but they are. I see this as a very aggressive move on their part. So, what are your thoughts?
Yes, it's very aggressive, and it's very much a gamble when you can look at these numbers. So looking at these numbers, you're looking at them shelling out 469 million, 300 million of which is going to go to Craig, Johnson, and Bergman right off the bat, which leaves you 169 million. And then if you look at 45 million for the second and third sequel each, that's 90 from that. That leaves $79 million left over. Okay. If they increase the budget on the films, which, maybe they would,
I think that would be smart. I was surprised that wasn't part of the deal, but yeah, go on.
Right, but it doesn't leave Netflix much else left after they've invested this money into making these sequels. So it very much is a risk and a gamble. I'm not saying that the sequels won't do well. I'll definitely be interested in checking them out. I mean, they, just from the strength of the first film. But if these don't do well, then it's going to put Netflix at a loss, in my opinion, based upon these numbers. And, that's a very risky thing. It's going to be interesting to see, the success of these sequels, but then, if they aren't successful, how this is going to affect Netflix in the long haul. And you made a point about them catching up. So Netflix began providing streaming content in 2007. It was basically the first of the streaming services. But one thing to consider is that when they first started out, they weren't heavily involved in original content. Original content on streaming services is relatively new.
Yeah,
in the grand scheme of things. And the first to provide the original content was Netflix. And that started a big boom. But there are a lot of other factors that play into this as well. Over the course of this time, you're also looking at how television in and of itself has changed with regards to how people watch television. You started seeing a lot of people start to cancel their cable subscriptions and essentially stream movies and stream these services because they're already paying for the internet. By the time this started, a lot of people had internet in their homes just for GP, and now even more so. So it stood to reason, if I'm already paying for internet and I'm paying specifically for these streaming services that I actually am going to watch as opposed to a cable package, it would be smarter to do that. And then you also have to look at how regular television is watched. A lot of these streaming services, sometimes you pay a little extra to be able to stream live television, because watching live television anymore requires you to have an antenna, which prior to this was a different signal. You just plug the TV on and then you just turn to the channel and it automatically tunes to that channel. That's something that, young people today don't even know about, because that's something that changed, that, was commonplace for older people and before this change happened. So the direction that TV is moving, and how people watch television is a big factor in this as well. Not to mention the fact that when the studios started to get their own streaming services, this was a huge change. You had Hulu, which was partially owned by NBC, Fox, and CBS. It kind of changed things, and ABC. It was like the actual studios were like, we need our own streaming service so that we can provide our contents and have our own pay window. But if we pull together, then this gives the consumer a greater value, because now they can watch their currently airing television shows the next day on our streaming services. So it doesn't tie them to a DVR, or back then some people still had VHS. It doesn't tie them to that. They can watch it the next day and in its entirety. And if you pay a little extra, you can watch it without commercials. And so people were looking at this like, wow, you know, I'm not going to pay for cable anymore. I'm going to pay for the streaming services. And, you know, Netflix was left like, but look at me. And then they had films. So that was their strength. They had the actual films catalog. And that was what was keeping the lights on. But then they said, you know what? We're going to start putting our focus on original content. And that flooded the gates. It was like, boom, you know, and then Netflix was back in business. But then these other large studios, because remember, I was just mentioning the television studios. I'm not talking about Sony, Disney, Warner Brothers. Those are the big movie guys. So then they got the idea, well, what if we had our own streaming services with our own films that we produce, and we control it that way? And so it becomes this big, you know, huge competition on who's going to have the original content. And then COVID happened, which changed the scope of how people watch films and television once again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you've had all of these things happen in the course of 14 years, which isn't a really long time when you think about it. And it's culminated in what we have now. You have HBO Max, you have Disney Plus, you have Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and Paramount Plus, and adding all of those streaming services up with like your HBO, your Showtime, your Stars, and even Amazon Prime, which has their own original content now. And for shits and giggles, let's add Apple TV in there. You're paying
someone's watching it, right?
Right. And you're paying as much as, you know, you would for basic cable. But the thing is that I find interesting, because I stream. I don't pay for cable. I stream. And one of the things I found that was most interesting was the fact that I'm not having to look at a gazillion other stations that I will never watch. I'm paying the same amount of money, but I'm getting the comfort of having everything pinpointed to what I watch, plus the premium channels, which if you pay for basic cable, the premium channels would be even more. So you still end up paying more with cable than you would streaming. And I've got to pay for my internet service anyway, because, you know, so it just makes sense. And I think that the studios, both the television studios and the big movie studios, saw the writing on the wall. And I think that Netflix is, you know, still holding their own. I mean, they kind of had their little battles with these other streaming services, and they, you know, they lick their wounds and they come back swinging. And I think that I have to hand it to them. I have to give them credit for that. And their original content is not to be, you know, laughed at. I mean, they have some serious films in their catalog of original content that is basically, in my opinion, movie quality, you know, something that could have been shown on the big screen. So, you know, it's just going to be interesting as we move into this new decade to see how watching television and how movie going further develops and further evolves based upon what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. Just piggyback a couple quick thoughts. I mean, it's changed even more rapidly when you consider, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Stranger Things was probably the first big breakthrough original content on a streaming service that everyone really cared about. And that was what, 2016? So, so we're talking 5 years ago. And at that point, I can remember when we cut the cord, Hulu was where you got all your TV. Pretty much anything that was on a network you knew would show up on Hulu within a day or two. Netflix was where pretty much all your movies were, and Amazon Prime, I don't think anyone, was really quite sure what Amazon Prime was doing, but those were the three. And then it changed so fast. And then suddenly Hulu lost the CW shows because CW created their own thing. They lost a lot of the CBS shows because CBS created their own thing. And now we're in this landscape where things are shuffling around all over the place. And now it seemed like for a while there, Netflix was king of the original series, and now it's much more splintered. I really don't know how cable competes, except for the fact that they've got 24-hour news. That's about the only reason I could think to have cable at this point, because now, and I just found this out recently, but the HBO app has like TCM, and I found Doctor Who on there and some other things that I wasn't aware was on that station. There are several layers to the HBO All Access that I was unaware of, that I don't think are necessarily well known, but you can still pretty well watch whatever you want with 3 or 4 streaming services, and it's a pittance compared to cable. But I'm kind of rambling here a bit, but
well, no, you make some good points. I will point out 2 things with regards to what you said. With regards to 24-hour news, you really don't even need cable for that, because the apps that are free, that are on streaming devices such as the Fire Stick and Roku, have the CBS, the ABC, and the NBC streaming news channels, which are 24 hours a day. There's a lot of repetition in that, but they do have breaking news segments. So you really don't even need that. I mean, you don't even need cable for that. So
and I'll be, I do watch. I'll watch the YouTube channels of a lot of those 24-hour services anyway. So
right, exactly.
I'm not totally out. It's amazing to me how cable still, I don't know how it's even considered a viable option these days. I really don't. The streaming option is so much nicer. You can watch things on your time. You can start things when you want. You can pause and pick up right where you left off. I mean, you could do that with a DVR, but you're not even using disk space to do it. It's up in the cloud, So
well, I think that cable might be easier for an older generation too, because streaming is something that does require you to basically have rudimentary computer skills to be able to sign up and log into the specific streaming accounts. And I could see someone in the digital divide being like, I don't have time for that kind of crap, nor am I interested in it. I just pay the cable and switch the channels to what I want, because it may be easier for them. And I know some older people who have that mindset.
You're absolutely right. And not to be morbid about it, though, that just means that it's going to be a shrinking demographic.
Oh, it's just a matter of time. Remember when having the internet was a luxury, like, you had to, only young people had that. Well, most of those people have passed on, and now even people who are older than us have the internet just because that's what they do, or someone in their family has introduced them to streaming and maybe set it up for them. So it's definitely the wave of the future. And at some point in the future, it's just going to be a staple of how things are done. I did want to also piggyback on what you said. Stranger Things, as far as a streaming show, is probably one of the biggest hits, overarching, but one of the first hits that is definitely should be mentioned, and was what really set off the streaming original content, was House of Cards. House of Cards was the one that really went over with Netflix as far as their streaming service is concerned, because that's what got people talking. And there was a lot of controversy surrounding this show with Kevin Spacey. So
more so now, yeah.
Right. So I'd have to say that who kicked it off? House of Cards, most definitely. But who is now, the thing that was just on the lips of everyone that eclipsed House of Cards with regards to what people were talking about? Definitely Stranger Things 3 years later. So, yeah, I just thought that was worthy of mentioning.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't watch it myself, but I definitely caught the buzz, and I wasn't thinking about it. I suppose Stranger Things means more to me because I had streaming when that kicked in, and we just had no idea what we were in for once that show came in.
Right. Yeah, I watched House of Cards, and it's a really good show. It gives you a lot of say what you will about him as a person, but Kevin Spacey performed very well in that show, and there's no denying that. No matter what you think of him as a person, as an actor, he's a great actor. I mean, let's just be real. There's a lot of people who may not like personally, but a sports reference here briefly would be you've got a quarterback, an NFL quarterback who I just loathe, and that's Brady.
Sure, same.
Yeah, but I can't deny that the man is a phenomenal football player. He has talent, and he has the rings to back it up, and I can't take that away from him.
No, I can try, but I can't.
But right? The facts are the facts, and so you gotta sometimes hold your nose and swallow the pill. That all being said, that wraps up our segments here. One thing we want to make an announcement about in parting is in memoriam. This past week, we lost rap artist DMX, who unfortunately had died of a heart attack. If you don't know who DMX is, not only was he the founding member of the Rough Riders, he was also in other films. He was in Romeo Must Die. His music was in Romeo Must Die, where he had a duet with Aaliyah, and that film starred Jet Li. And then he was in a film with Jet Li. Just making his mark not only in music, but also in film. And, there's no denying, whether you're a fan of his music or not, what he contributed. He was in Belly, which was a very acclaimed film. And he was also in Exit Wounds. That's the film he was in with Steven Seagal. And then Cradle to the Grave was the film he was in with Jet Li. And then he was also in Last Hour, which starred David Carradine and Paul Sorvino. So he's had a lot of success, not only as a musician, but as an actor. And it's sad to see him go. I'm not the hugest DMX fan, but, if you wanted to get hype, you got this dude yelling, you're going to get hype. Even if you might not want to. So have to hand it to him. He will be sorely missed for rap fans around the world. And we also lost Britain's Prince Philip, who was the husband of Queen Elizabeth. I don't really have much to say about this cat. He was a royal. That's all I
He was
got.
he was good at staying under the radar and letting Queen Elizabeth get all the attention, and that was always his intent, and that's what he did. And to be fair, I don't think he was all that terribly interested in doing much more than that. You got to respect a guy who thought that much of his significant other to realize what his role was. But yeah, I agree. There's not much more to say except for the fact that if his intention was to kind of lay low, he absolutely did. I remember all the jokes about Queen Elizabeth being so old, but Prince Philip was older than her, and you never heard anyone really comment about that. So I think that was part of the shock. He was kind of this guy that was just kind of there. He was doing the royal thing and doing it well by all accounts, but you didn't give him a whole lot of thought, and now he's gone. Kind of the end of an era, because Queen Elizabeth still with us, but I mean, that whole thing is kind of a mess. I think that there's going to be some shifts in Britain coming up sooner than later. It's all chaos right now. I don't want to get all into the controversy of that, but it's an interesting thing to witness right now.
Absolutely. And he wasn't known for his public relations, where a lot of the subjects of Britain were concerned. So yeah. Segments of the community had gripes about him, and I'm going to leave it there.
There you go.
And lastly, but not least, notable author and a personal friend, Derek Ferguson, passed away on April 4th. This one really hit me hard, as Derek, besides being an uber talented author, he was a good friend. He was someone who encouraged me in my writing career. He's someone who was there for a lot of authors who were up and coming. He was someone who always provided encouragement and was always there, working behind the scenes, and producing phenomenal work. He had a series about a character named Dylan. And if you have the opportunity, any of our listeners or viewers should go check that out. He, was published mainly through Pro Se Productions, and he had a huge catalog of books. He also had a story featured in Black Pulp, which one of my stories is featured in the sequel. I wish I could have had some projects that we worked on together, because I was looking forward to that. And speaking of Derek, he also had a podcast very similar to this one called Superhero Cinephiles, which I was hoping, to be a guest on, and vice versa, having him on this show. It was something that we were planning, that sadly did not come to fruition, and that's rough. It was.
The author community is a tight one. I didn't know Derek personally, but my Facebook lit up pretty intently, and I've seen some wonderful things about him. Makes me wish I did know him better. And my sincere condolences to the loss. Apparently he was a heck of a guy, and when you talk about people that need to check his stuff out a little more intently, you're talking to me too. So definitely on my to-do list. But yeah, I'm seeing it all over the place. People are really hurt by this one. So that I don't have much more to add, but it was clearly sad news for the author community.
Very much so, very much so. So we leave this this episode, this first episode of our new segment, Nerd News, on this note. But I want to encourage our viewers and listeners to subscribe to our channel, the Two Towers Talk Show channel, so that you're able to get these particular episodes right when they air. And please give us some feedback, and we love to hear from you, what you guys thought about what we talked about. What are your opinions? What are your thoughts? We'd love to hear from you. And please give our episodes a thumbs up if you liked it. Definitely helps in us gauging what we're producing and how well received it is. If you want to reach out to me, see what's going on with me, you can look me up on johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they find you, RJ?
rjsullivanfiction.com.
And you can also check out our Two Towers blog website at thetwotowerstalkshow.com as well. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, stay nerdy. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.